be thy great and holy name. Thank you very much for this time that you have given us so that we can set aside this evening to spend time reading your word. We pray that you please help our conversations to be uplifting and spiritually edifying. We pray that you be with the speaker and that his message will us and be implementable in the rest of our lives. We thank you for all your many gifts and blessings and the trials that you have put in our lives. And in your son's name, amen.
Amen. So, I'm glad to see everybody tonight. Thank you for taking time out to be with us. So, tonight we're going to go through two of the bigger events that have happened recently in more detail. And I'm hoping that we can draw some biblical conclusions from them about both. So I started looking at, after this major explosion that happened in Beirut, Lebanon. Okay. I started looking at prophecy about Lebanon, and there's more than I am presenting tonight, but it's a sort of a selection of verses that I thought were very prudent to talk about. So I really want you to look here at let's see if I can use my little annotator. I want you to look at this area right here that's carved out in red. This is the building that blew up. All these other buildings were destroyed all the way around here, but that's the building that the ammonium nitrate was actually in. And the fireworks factory, I think, was over here, I believe. But all the rest of these are warehouses. So it basically, one is here, and it ignited this, which set off all the rest of this, if you will. And this here. Wow. Anyway, so I'll read this little piece for you. Video analysis of Beirut explosion revealed its power at even great distances. Lebanon continues to shift from the wreckage of a massive explosion that leveled Beirut on Tuesday. At least 150 people were killed, and that number is like 4 times that now. And more than 5,000 were injured, and an estimated 300,000 people lost their homes. It basically knocked out all the windows for 3 miles all the way around, like everything. The detonation of an estimated 2,750 metric tons of ammonium nitrate, a fertilizer and bomb-making ingredient, engulfed the city. The material had been stored in a Beirut port warehouse since 2014, so it had been there for 6 years. Where was it before that?
On a ship.
On a Russian ship that couldn't leave the harbor. When it was seized by customs authorities, according to the Lebanese Prime Minister Hassan Diab, drawing on the available video, photographs, and satellite imagery of the explosion, the Washington Post analysis the moments that led up to the devastating blast and the aftermath. The gathering materials were shattered with explosive experts, engineers, chemists, and physicians to better understand the explosion and the impact of the destructive force. Both the explosion, multiple videos show a plume of mostly white smoke rising from the port facility near the area where the ammonium nitrate was reportedly being stored by the Lebanese Authority. In a video circulated on social media, firefighters are seen standing outside of a burning warehouse. Marwan Abold, the governor of Beirut, said that 10 firefighters who were at the scene were killed. I'm trying to go to the next slide. Why won't it let me?
Probably bigger.
And it's all right.
You got it.
All right. Okay. I'm trying to get it to stop. All right. Can anybody read this, or is it too small? If it's too small, I can read it.
What did you ask?
I was just wondering if it's too small for people to see this. Or can you read it, Martha, or can you see
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Video analysis of Beirut explosion reveals its power, even at great distances. Then, a series of orange flashes cut through the smoke. Several explosive experts said the flashes are the result of smaller explosions at the base of the fire. Yeah, because those showed up on the video, those little sparks there, indicating the presence of explosive materials like ammunitions or fireworks. It's still unclear what caused the initial spark. The high temperatures caused by the fire and large quantities of ammonium nitrate packed within a confined space created the conditions necessary for a catastrophic explosion capable of leveling buildings, according to this guy, an explosive expert at the New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology. This was a perfect storm, he told the Post. At about 6:08 p.m. local time, a bright red flash marks the detonation of the ammonium nitrate, according to several explosive experts who reviewed videos of the incident for the Post. Rapidly expanding gases created by the detonation produce a supersonic shock wave capable of traveling at speeds of up to 2,000 meters per second. The explosive burst of the shock wave creates a wall of highly pressurized air near the blast site. It's capable of causing the disruption of vital organs, collapsed lungs, burst eardrums, and even death, according to Anthony Bull. Wow. The director of Center for Blast Injury Studies at Imperial College London, who studies the effects of explosions on the human body. As the explosion grows, the initial shock wave condenses water in the atmosphere to create a large, expanding hemispherical cloud that quickly dissipates as it passes. The pressure wave generates a massive cloud of debris that heaves a wall of deadly projectiles, commonly referred to as missiles by experts. The shattered masonry and glass fragments inside the cloud cause even more catastrophic destruction and injuries. The majority of fatalities are likely to have been caused by missiles and or building collapse. A UK-based explosive expert and chemical engineer, Tony Ennis, told the Post in an email. Those nearest to the blast are likely to have been killed by a combination of blast, thermal radiation.
Very good. Thank you very much. So you see all these things in movies like Mission Impossible and all these other movies where people go through these blasts and they survive and they go on to the next thing. You don't live through these things. It's all fake props and CGI and all the rest of the stuff. The sonic boom of what happened with this air pressure that goes across the city knocked all the glass out of every building for 3 miles, all the way around. I mean, the people who are filming this with their camera are on top of a building over a mile away. They get knocked to the ground when this happens. It's just unreal. Yes, Jacob?
I was not aware that what 2,000 meters per second is in American measurements. So that is apparently a little over a mile per second that is traveling. Mile 0.243 miles to be exact. So like that, you practically have it reaching.
Yeah, it's insanely fast. People were lucky to get any footage of this at all because of how fast it was going. But mind you, it had been sitting there for 7 long years, right next to a fireworks factory. There's some zoning city problem errors there, but anyway.
It's just interesting that people would have been hit with the blast before they heard it.
Oh yeah. Yep. Because
They didn't hear an explosion and then have a chance to turn or duck or anything.
So what I want to show you is this is the warehouse we speak of right here. Okay. This is what was the warehouse and is now a crater that is part of the port of Beirut. It blasts out. This silo building here is almost completely leveled, and everything here, here, and here, all of this is just gone. These buildings, this is a parking lot, but all these buildings are now just completely flattened. So you can see the before and after very distinctly. And now I gotta erase all this. I'm better at erasing than I am drawing. There we go. Okay, let's slide. So this is to show you very frankly, look and see if you see any glass in any building anywhere in downtown Beirut.
That's amazing.
Can you identify any? Because I can't see any. I looked and looked in this picture. You can't see any glass. That's a 30-story building and there's not a bit of glass in it. No. So, Jacob, would you read Psalms 29? I thought this was so appropriate when we're talking about what does the Bible say against Lebanon. Go ahead.
Psalms 29, the voice of the Lord, Davidic Psalm. According to Yahweh, you heavenly beings, ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to Yahweh the glory due his name. Worship Yahweh in the splendor of his holiness. The voice of the Lord is above the waters. The God of glory thunders. The Lord above vast waters. The voice of the Lord in power. The voice of the Lord in splendor. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The Lord shatters the cedars of Lebanon, makes Lebanon skip like a calf, and Syrian like a young wild ox. The voice of the Lord flashes flames of fire. The voice of the Lord shakes the wilderness. The Lord shakes the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord makes the deer give birth and strips the woodland bare. In his temple all cry, glory! The Lord sat enthroned at the flood. The Lord sits enthroned, king forever. The Lord gives his people strength. The Lord blesses his people with peace.
Okay, so I didn't want to wrest scripture here, so I didn't just pull out the piece I wanted. I think it's very interesting how closely this reads, because you're talking about the port city of Beirut, and it's sort of like the Lord is hovering above the waters, and he thunders, and there's vast waters, and then it talks about leveling the cedars of Lebanon and making Lebanon skip like a calf, and then talking about the flashes of flame of fire. So I just thought, very interesting. I don't know if this was explicitly written for this moment in time or if it has many different applicabilities, but it certainly could be used to describe this situation that happened in Beirut. So the other one is from Isaiah 2, which I think is pretty powerful as well. Karen, are you able to read that one? Or is it too small?
Let's see. Isaiah 2, for the day of the belonging to the Lord of the host is coming, against all that is proud and lofty, against all that is lifted up. It will be humbled, against all the cedars of Lebanon, lofty, lifted up, against all the oaks of Bashan, against all the high mountains, against all the lofty hills, against every high tower, against every fortified wall, against every ship of Tarshish, and against every splendid sea vessel. So human pride will be brought low, and the loftiness of men will be humbled. The Lord alone will be exalted on the day. The idols will vanish completely. People will go into caves in the rocks and holes in the ground, away from the terror of the Lord and from his majestic splendor, when he rises to terrify the earth. On the day, people will throw their silver and gold idols, which they made to worship, to the moles and the bats. They will go into the caves of the rocks and the crevices in the cliffs, and from the terror of the Lord and from his majestic splendor, when he rises to terrify the earth. Put no more trust in man, who has only the breath in his nostrils. What is he really worth?
So Isaiah 2 is, it's a universal application against everybody who's arrogant and lifted up. But it specifically mentions Lebanon here, and I just think it fits really well. The other thing is that, of course, this is against every ship of Tarshish and against every splendid sea vessel. You can see just two in the photo that I showed you. But it's that they're going to have to give up on the things that they entrusted in. So Syria, along with Lebanon, how have they treated Israel?
Poorly.
They have harbored the terrorists, paid the terrorists, trained the terrorists that have been going against Israel all this time. So this ammonium nitrate's been sitting there for 7 years. ISIS could have picked it up. Hezbollah could have picked it up. There's a lot of other people who could have got their hands on it. And I guess the government officials didn't let anybody know it was there, or else they would have grabbed it a long time ago. We probably won't know for years what all the background story is on this, but I view this as sort of like the civil war in Syria. It's another judgment against a nation who hates Israel, who wants them gone. And this happened like within a week or week and a half of the UAE and Israel making peace. So it's just uncanny that all these things are happening at the same time. I mean, I didn't have any of this in my class beforehand, but I'm pulling it in because it's so relevant.
People that live there said it was like a war in just a few minutes.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. So there's another picture of it, and you can just see how devastated the city is. And I should say that Lebanon is also on the verge of financial insolvency before this even happened.
Yeah.
And now it's even worse. Plus 80% of their grain was sitting where when the explosion happened?
There's silos right next to it.
In those silos. So 80% of their food reserves just went bye-bye. It went up in a big cloud of smoke. So I don't know if you all have seen this. Trying to get my mouse to work.
Just after 6 p.m. local time on Tuesday, the 4th of August, an explosion ripped through Beirut's port. People in Lebanon's capital had earlier spotted a large fire at the port, billowing dark smoke into the air. There were reports that a warehouse containing fireworks had caught fire. And several videos of the scene showed colored flashes in the flames. Videos from the scene suggest there was one smaller explosion. And then roughly 30 seconds later, this enormous shock. The blast struck with the force of a 3.5 magnitude earthquake. This was the aftermath. Windows shattered in buildings across the city and damaged cars on the roads near the port. This is where the explosion happened. 4 kilometers away, in the St. Mar Meroun church, a priest and his congregation were taking part in Mass. The explosion was caught on camera 11 kilometers away in the Dabia Marina. The blast was so big that it was heard from the mountains. This video from the town of Brumana, 15 kilometers away, shows how far the shockwave reached. It was even heard and felt as far away as Cyprus, more than 125 miles across the Mediterranean. Aerial shots show the scale of the destruction of the port. It reportedly housed 85% of Lebanon's supply of grain, which was a strategic food reserve in a country crippled by economic meltdown. You can see the impact on the Beirut port silos building before and after the explosion. Surrounding the silos were corrugated iron and steel structures that have mostly been destroyed. These satellite images reveal the extent of the damage. This crater was once a warehouse. Now it's underwater. The colossal force was caused by the explosion of 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate, a highly reactive chemical which was being stored unsafely in a hangar on the port. Lebanon's Prime Minister Hassan Diab has promised that those responsible for the catastrophe will pay the price.
Okay, so the next one I want to talk about is the peace treaty between the United Arab Emirates and Israel. It's very tough to get to the bottom of this and figure out what did the UAE benefit, how did the United States benefit, and how did Israel benefit? And what do we know from Bible prophecy that would have any bearing on this? So you think about this and you're like, why in the world would this treaty happen right now? When the whole world is in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, Russian is poisoning anybody who's against Putin. That's been all over the news lately. He's like, no, I didn't poison my political opponent. I just had all the last ones jailed or thrown out of the country. Anyway, Turkey is threatening to liberate the Dome of the Rocks. That's what the DOTR stands for. Israel was in the middle of the annex of the West Bank, which the rest of the world was fighting their teeth at because they didn't know what was going to happen. The civil war that continues to go on in Syria, the port explosion in Beirut, and a peace treaty with Israel. Can 2020 get any stranger? It's just getting wilder and wilder. In addition to having 2 hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico, which everybody thought was the biggest weather anomaly they'd seen in a lifetime. So I just want to show you how is this Middle East deal shaping up the Middle East right now. So on the left, the map in blue, that's Israel, and the red is United Arab Emirates, 2 slivers of a country in the Middle East. You can barely see them on the map. So when you look at the one on the right, this is the big difference because you can see who's on what side. So just like World War I, when we were studying that as God's hand is in it all, you can see that Russia is lining up with Syria, Iraq, and Iran. And I would also throw Turkey in there. I don't know why they didn't, but and then the U.S. sphere of influence is getting smaller and smaller. We're basically Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. So there's a lot of areas where we yet to have under our control, and Yemen is going through a massive civil war. So it's partly under Saudi Arabia's control and partly under Iran's control. But this is what this green area to the north is exactly what Iran wants, which is the old Levant states, all connected from Iran on the Caspian Sea all the way across to the Mediterranean, a straight drive east-west. So that way they've got basically connections from the Mediterranean all the way out to the Indian Ocean on both sides. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. In Ezekiel 38, and I do want to get into this next week because I really think we need to look at that. What everybody's getting excited about is this. They see it as the shaping up of alliances. And that's what we just saw on this map is these alliances are being formed right now. And it says Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish with all of its rulers will ask you, have you come to seize the spoil? Have you assembled your hordes to carry off plunder, to make off with silver and gold, to take cattle and possessions and to seize great spoil? That takes a lot of understanding because Ezekiel 38 has 13 qualifiers at the beginning of that chapter that, in my opinion, and forgive me for being frank, even though my name is not Frank, it is being overlooked. It says it's a nation not trained for war. They have a generation between them in the last war that they've had. That's basically what it says. No bars, no gates, no walls, no weapons of war whatsoever. A people used to living in peace. That is not Israel by any stretch of the imagination. It's pure fiction to believe that that is the condition there right now. And the reason why I'm so strong about this is because it talks about taking a spoil in verse 13, and God does not leave us without an answer. If you look at the end of Zechariah chapter 14, and we'll get into this next week in detail, it says all the wealth of all the nations is going to be brought to Israel. Then you really will have a spoil. Imagine, Roger, if you could have all the wealth of Windsor Farms, just the people who live in Windsor Farms. And Betty and Eb, if you had all the wealth of the people who just lived in Richmond, you would be rich indeed. And Jacob, if you had all the wealth of the United States, that would be pretty wealthy, wouldn't it?
Why would I have all that?
Well, my point is, this is the wealth of all the nations. Albemarle County, Virginia, not just Washington, D.C. It's the wealth of all the nations being brought to Israel.
I don't want all that.
No, the point is that is the spoil. That is the spoil. That's in the end of Zechariah 14. So I just am saying that because the alliances are shaping up and Israel will have something to do with this. And in 38, literally verse by verse, it shows us where all these different places are on earth today because it's foreign to us now and it's easy to understand. So in verse, let's see, what's the first one? Tubal is verse 2, and you have Tubal, Meshech, and Rosh up there in the upper part of Asia, which is all modern day Ukraine and Russia, obviously. You have Persia, which is verse 5, which is now modern day Iran. You have Togarmah, which is Turkey and part of Syria and Iraq. You have Sheba and Dedan, which is Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Yemen and Oman. So all those countries, and Jordan is all part of that. And Ethiopia is verse 5 down below, Libya is verse 5, Gomer is verse 6, which is the European state, and Magog, verse 2, is over there towards Poland. So it's basically saying you're going to have an alliance between Tarshish, which people have conventionally understood as being the trading nations, which is Great Britain and her young lions, which would include Australia, Canada, United States, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, India, and possibly part of other countries. So these alliances are what people are getting very excited about. I don't know if anybody can read it because I know it's rather small. Martha, do you want to take a crack at this one again?
Sure. In Jeremiah 49, is that
Yep.
what you mean?
Yep.
It is written concerning Dedan, flee, turn back, dwell deep, O inhabitants of Dedan, for I will bring the calamity of Esau upon him, the time that I will visit him. Here, Dedan is located in relation to Esau or Edom, which was to the southeast of Israel. Ezekiel 25 also confirms this location. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, I will also stretch out mine hand upon Edom, and will cut off man and beast, and I will make it desolate from Heman, and they of Dedan shall fall by the sword. In Ezekiel 27, it seems that the two peoples of Dedan are differentiated. One group, probably the Hamitic group, traded in ivory and ebony. The other, presumably Abrahamic group, traded in cloth. In the place where ancient Dedan once was, stands modern-day Saudi Arabia. Near the modern town of Al-Ola in Saudi Arabia are remains of a city known in ancient times as Dedan, which was at one time the second capital of the Nabateans. Smith, in his Bible dictionary, believes that the two groups of Dedan intermarry. He writes, we have here a Dedan connected with Arabia, probably the northwestern part of the peninsula and Kedar, and also with the father and brother of the Cushite Dedan. The probable inference from these mentions of Dedan support the arguments first stated. And I can't read that.
Dedan, son of Ramah, settled on the shores of the Persian Gulf, and his descendants became the caravan merchants between the coast and Palestine. Jokshan, the son of Jokshan, by intermarriage with the Cushite Dedan, formed a tribe of the same name, which appears to have had its chief settlements near the border of Idumea and perhaps led a pastoral life. So it's that region of the Middle East that is basically quantified as that, and from Jeremiah, from Ezekiel, and from several other passages. Does anybody have any thoughts that they want to share about this? Because I know it's a lot to take in. Okay. So where is Sheba today? And I want to talk about this some more because Yemen, what's going on in Yemen right now?
war.
Civil War. So I heard.
Civil war, and it's a proxy war for two countries. Who are they? Iran and
Oh.
Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia is fighting, and they're supplying weapons and money and people to their side, and Iran is feeding the other side with weapons and money, and the whole, it's just like us in Vietnam. You know, we're supplying one side, and the Chinese are supplying the other side. So same.
Religious thing?
Yeah, well, yes, and political, because they just using this to get back at each other. Roger, do you want to read this one?
All right. There's a general consensus that the nation of Sheba was located roughly in the area known today as Yemen. It was from here that the queen came to visit Solomon. And when the queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to prove him with hard questions. She brought gold and spices to Solomon, and she gave the king 120 talents of gold, and of spices great abundance, precious stones. Neither was there any such spice as the queen of Sheba gave King Solomon. Sheba was renowned for its spices, incense, and gold, with which it traded with other countries. The multitude of camels shall cover the dromedaries of Midian and Ephah. All they from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and incense, and they shall show forth the praises of the Lord.
Okay, thank you very much. So that gives you a historical context to what's going on in Yemen right now, but the country is just completely devastated by what's going on in the land.
Joe, I
Yeah.
just wanted to say, when you asked about Saudi Arabia, and it talked about like Joktan and Kedar, like it really goes back to the relatives of Abraham. That's why that's so important.
Yeah, that really does. So they are all the relatives of, they're all cousins of Abraham through Abraham's second wife. And
Whereas Iran is not at all. They're Persian. They're not even Arabs. They're not relatives of Abraham.
got very distinct. Yeah, and I wanted to include Obadiah 1, but we don't have time to get into that today. But I wanted to talk about, so we did all this background to shape how we should think about it biblically when we're talking about the Israel-UAE deal and whether it's good or bad. So first of all, what other countries has Israel as a nation made peace with in the Middle East since 1948?
Jordan.
Egypt and Jordan, that's it. Number 1 and number 2. This is number 3 for them. So Egypt did it during the Carter administration. It was a land for peace deal. They gave back the entire Sinai Peninsula and a lot of other resources to have peace with Egypt, with President Sadat. It did not end well for Israel, and it did not, I mean, Sadat was murdered, and oh gosh, the Prime Minister of Israel. Even, no, way before that. I can't think of his name. It is Rabin.
Who was?
Died quite miserably, so it was a very bad deal. The second deal that happened was with Jordan. Jordan doesn't want the Palestinians back because it would be a threat to the Hasmonite dynasty of Jordan. They're in the minority. They already have enough Palestinians, and it's already a rocky road for them. So
Well, because they allowed the Palestinians to come in. They're the only ones who allowed them to come in. And then while they're there, to try to take over the country. So they said, forget it. We don't want them again.
Nope. That's an excellent point, Martha. Excellent.
Which is another reason they want the annexation. They would like a little border there to protect them from the Palestinians. They're happy to have Israel in charge and with their security so that the Palestinians will not come back into Jordan. They don't want that to happen again.
Nobody wants them. It's unfortunate because it's because of the constant terrorism. There's no other reason than that. And it's been nonstop, and it's very unsettling for Israel. Security-wise, they've suffered, with a lot of these gaseous balloons that have set off fires all over Israel very recently. So this deal is very interesting to study. I'm not sure that we know all the facts, but I'm giving you what I have. This is from The Economist, which I thought was really interesting. Of course, everybody else thought this deal was going to bring about the end of the world, but The Economist was more level-headed. Who haven't I called on? Patsy, can you read this one?
In many ways, the region looks the same as it did 4 decades ago.
Autocracy
Autocracy is still
in vogue.
vogue. The Palestinians remain stateless, but relations between Israel and the rest of the Arab world are unrecognizable. When the United Arab Emirates agreed to establish diplomatic ties with the Jewish state on August 13th, there was little grief or fury in the region capitals. Israel's first formal relationship with the Gulf state and its third with the Arab country, Egypt and Jordan being the others, was met with praise from many Arab leaders.
Isn't that surprising? That's like unheard of. In the past, what did they always do if anybody did anything to bless Israel? They all jumped all over it. I mean, they were just like, throw gasoline on that country and set them alight. You know, we're not going to stand for this. And there's always demonstrations and now we've got Arab leaders saying, "You go UAE, make that peace accord with Israel." And we're like, what has happened to the world? This truly is peace, but there is no peace. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Some are calling it a breakthrough, others the turning point for peace. But the deal is not remarkable for how it might transform the region. Rather, it reflects remarkable changes that have already taken place. A part of the world once defined by Arab Israeli hostilities is no longer so. Countries increasingly look towards the future, not the past, when shaping their policies. In a predominantly troubled neighborhood, this decline in tension is worth celebrating, even if other dangerous fallout lines remain.
Very good. So they're basically saying this is very new. This is only the third country Israel has been a state that's made a peace alliance with Israel. And instead of criticizing the other Arab leaders, unexpectedly are praising them instead of pointing the finger at them and they're like, we're going to come after you next, which is pretty much the way it's been for many, many years. And it's a transformation. Yes, Walter.
Remember I said last week that this is a turning point where they're separating peace from the Palestinians from the rest of the Arab world. Arab says, I don't care about Palestinians anymore in the peace process. We want peace, and you go do whatever you want, Palestinians, and figure it out. Very important.
Also, I think the Trump administration's made that very clear because they pulled out all aid and funding. And I'm like, why should we give you our tax dollars when you curse the United States every time we turn around? So it's a very troubled region. I try to empathize with all sides, but Eb, can you read this one? Is that okay? Or is that too small?
I can't read it.
It's very small on this little iPad.
Oh, no, it's fine. Walter, would you like to try to read this?
Come over there and read it.
Okay.
Give it a shot. It was no secret that Israel and the Gulf states had grown closer of late. Motivated by a common enemy, Iran, their armies and spy agencies swapped intelligence. Recently, Israeli officials began popping up in Gulf capitals, but the UAE's decision to take its relationship public will bring more benefits for both sides. Israeli business people are excited about their access to Dubai, the region's financial hub, which happens to be in dire need of a cleanup. Deals have already been signed between Israeli and Emirati. Ooh, I can't see that. It feels like a much warmer peace than between Israel and Egypt, Other Arab states are talking about following the UAE's lead. Give the Trump administration due credit. 7 months ago, it unveiled a peace plan that was immediately rejected by the Palestinians and most Arab states because it allowed Israel to annex about 30% of the occupied West Bank and give the Palestinians something less than a state in return. But at the same time, America was sponsoring secret talks between Israel and the UAE. Somehow, in a feat of diplomatic alchemy, American officials turned this far-fetched scheme into leverage. The UAE demanded no real concessions from Israel, other than a promise from Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, that he would not move ahead with the annexation at the moment.
Yep. So this is thank you very much, Walter. So you have to laugh because
At the moment.
every president since Carter has been trying to make a deal between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Trump says, why do that? Bye-bye. And he's like he's uniting United Arab Emirates on the other end of the whole Saudi Arabian peninsula with Israel. It's funny because nobody saw this coming. Nobody had a clue this was on the radar. And I don't know, I think it's funny and delightful that this happened under everybody's noses and pops out like a baby that was unexpected. The deal was a boon for Mr. Netanyahu has been under fire at home over the allegations of corruption and for his poor handling of COVID-19. The prime minister claims there is no change to his pledge to annex parts of the West Bank. In reality, the deal lets him duck a tricky issue. His nationalist allies have wanted him to absorb Israeli settlements in the occupied territories, even though it would have brought international opprobrium. Is that right? He has avoided that choice and nonetheless thrown the nationalists a bone. They have always rejected the idea of swapping land for peace. Long the framework of talks with the Arabs. Peace for peace should suffice, they argued. Now apparently it does. The big losers as ever are the Palestinians. Only 3 years ago, the Arab states re-endorsed the strategy for offering normal relations with Israel in return for its withdrawal of the occupied territories and the establishment of a Palestinian state, among other things. But Arab rulers, particularly in the Gulf, have grown increasingly frustrated with the stale and stubborn Palestinian leadership, perhaps exposing the charade of pan-Arab solidarity and the separating of Israeli-Arab conflict from the Israeli-Palestinian one will lead to more honest assessment of what is possible. For a long time being, though, a just solution to the Palestinian plight feels as elusive as ever. So what this is basically saying is Arabs are like realizing, okay, we've used Palestine as a punchline to get back at Israel all these years. It's not doing anybody any good. We're not getting anywhere with the Palestinians, and we still have no peace with Israel, and there's no financial benefit to us. So they're like, let's unlock these hinges and let Israel and Palestine work out their own problems. Meantime, we will work out our relationship with them. So what you might see is a cascading effect purely for financial reasons. Oil for water, perhaps. We'll see what happens. Or oil for technology. Everybody's kind of on the edge of financial brinksmanship, and they all have to get out from under something. Benjamin Netanyahu had to get out from some tight political squeezes. I mean, really tight. And the UAE did as well. So it's more or less like Virginia making a peace accord with Las Vegas and saying, let's get together, you and us. We're conservative and on the coast and a very different economy. We've got a lot of stuff in between us and Las Vegas on the other end, because Dubai is like a Las Vegas merged with Switzerland. I mean, it's like the center of banking and playtime, for the whole Arab state. So it's a very unusual situation. And this really gives us a good idea. This is from The Economist. I put the source on here for you all if you want to see it later. And one of those other fault lines, the most dangerous lines between, on one side, America, Israel, and much of the Arab world, and on the other, Iran. Its economy is on the brink of collapse, and we're talking about Iran. While its proxy in Lebanon, Hezbollah, faces a backlash over the deadly explosion in Beirut. Why? Because Hezbollah was trying to get their hands on the ammonium nitrate. So it all is bringing this together in one thing. The Israel-UAE deal, as much as it reflects their shared antagonism to Iran, adds to the new element of President Donald Trump's maximum pressure campaign. Where that campaign will ultimately lead remains an open question, but officials in America and the Middle East would do well to remember that bitterest enemies need not always remain so. So Trump's foreign policy is sort of like a doctor or a lawyer. You apply enough pressure and you're going to find out what's wrong and you're going to fix it. And that's what he's done. He's put so much pressure, you know, as a doctor or a lawyer does in the courtroom, that everybody's yielding. It's pretty amazing. So what's behind the Israeli-UAE deal? What are they actually getting out of this? I've put the question 100 different ways into Google. I'm like, what are they getting? What are they getting? What are they getting? And it's very hard to get to the bottom of it all. This is the best I could do. So if you find good articles about this, let me know. But it is very hard to ascertain what is the real benefit. Who haven't I called on? I can't even see. Margaret, can you read this one? Margaret, are you there?
Hang on. There we go. I'm eating.
Oh,
What is
sorry.
required?
I didn't know. I can't see you.
What is required under this new peace agreement known as the Abraham Accord? Is that what you're talking about?
Yep.
The agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates promised to establish normal relations between the two countries. These include business relations, tourism, direct flights, scientific cooperation, and in time, full diplomatic ties at the ambassadorial level. The Emiratis are unlikely, however, to locate their embassy in Jerusalem. An important component of the Abraham Accord, though not specifically spelled out, is enhanced security cooperation against regional threats, especially from Iran and its proxies. It is important to note that Israel and the UAE reportedly already have security ties, but the agreement brings them into the open. According to the Emirati government, the accord immediately stops Israeli plans to annex parts of the West Bank and provides an opportunity for Israel and the Palestinians to renew negotiations to end their conflict. Israeli officials use the word suspend. The difference in language represents the politics that each country's leader confronts. In the case of the UAE, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed clearly felt compelled to demonstrate that normal relations with the UAE were not cost-free for the Israelis. For Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's use of the term suspend is an effort to mollify pro-annexation political groups and factions, which have already criticized the government. Can I make 2 comments?
Please
Yes.
do.
Since I sent you stuff right before class that I read this afternoon.
Oh, wonderful.
One of which said, it's no longer annexation, it's been replaced with normalization.
Love the phraseology. It takes public affairs to get us there.
The other thing that I read today is about this accord, and that it's inevitable that UAE is going to get some fighter jets from the US.
The
And that
F-35s.
they have to figure out how to maintain Israel's military superiority, but allow it. And they said there's no way that the UAE ever agreed to this without that, thinking that that was part of it.
May I add a comment too?
Please do.
One of the ambassadors in Israel, who was an ambassador to the US, I guess, said that the Israelis actually try out these F-35s. So they're one of our greatest allies in that. They try out our technology, they fly them, but of course when they're flying them, they're using them in battle and stuff. So it's like do or die for them.
Right.
So they know what things are great about the F-35s, and if they have issues, they tell the U.S., and that really helps the U.S. because they're test flying these things for them. So even though they're selling them to UAE, Israel knows all about these,
Yep.
these jets. Yeah.
So there, that was what I was going to tell you. That was really funny. Was you get this huge blast of this treaty that's come out, and no sooner has the ink not even dried, and UAE's mad at Israel because Israel's telling UAE you can't buy those F-35 planes from America because it would be infringing upon our treaty. And that they basically, UAE is already ready to walk. I'm like, this was a very fragile relationship as it was.
But I do think a lot that they're gaining, like they're saying tourism and stuff. They've already invited them to come to Israel. And Saudi Arabia said, sure, fly over our country. That's fine, which tells you a lot too. But they can get medicine. They can get medical technology. You know, technology is their greatest export anyway. So they would have access to so many great things from Israel.
Yeah, they really would. And it's incredible too, because they both need each other's military intelligence against Iran to know what's going on. I mean, the UAE is right across the pond from them. And it's just so frightening because they're all being threatened by Iran. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Israel. Yes, Walter.
But let's not lose sight of what God told Israel in his word. Do not make peace treaties accords with your neighbors. Period. For no reason, even for security.
Right.
So interesting how God will respond.
But some people say that UAE is part of DDAN.
Right.
Yeah, it is part of, that's what we were spending the first part of the class showing, is it's part of Sheba and DDAN.
Yeah. One more thing, that in the Quran, it said it's okay to deceive the infidel. And who are the infidels? But Jews and Christians. So like they can say peace or they can agree to things, but if they lie, it's okay. The Quran gives them permission to do that and approves of that. So
we have laws like Allah is the greatest deceiver. That is why they are allowed to do that. They literally, Muhammad praised Allah or their version of God or as his ability as a deceiver, which is a complete, utter contradiction to the God whom the Jews and we worship. Right. We worship a God who does not lie, who is truthful to us, who will reveal what he wants us to know, and the things that he doesn't want us to know, he does not reveal to us. It's not being deceitful. It's just choosing a time and place for when we can learn things.
Walter's absolutely correct. Every time that Israel made any kind of a deal with somebody without God specifically telling them ahead of time to do something, they paid a price, and they still will.
I remember the Gibeonite deception when they came into the land, and that was like, you think Josh was rock solid, and then they make this decision, and it says they did not consult the Lord, but they sampled the provisions. I'm like, what provisions? It's moldy bread and bad wine. Why would you want to sample those provisions? They're not that desperate for food. Anyway, it's just amazing to me. So that was a very bad business deal. And that cost them the rest of their lives. They had to put up with the Girgashites and go to war for them multiple times. And that may happen here too. Why now? So this is very important to figure out too, is why would they want to do this now? I love this little graphic. I made it myself. I'm very proud of me. Putting it together. All right, let's see. Who else have I had not called on? I can't see who I have not called on, Walter. It's just too far away. Ryan, can you read this?
Ryan's, okay. I think his laptop just died, he said.
Okay, guess not.
I waited too long.
No, I think you just responded.
Okay, good.
Ryan, can you read it?
We're going to need you to unmute yourself.
I'm in now, yes, okay. Yeah, I can't unmute him, he has to do this.
Those are some pretty big words.
All right, I'll read it. Israel and the UAE have been inching towards normalization in recent years. In 2015, Israel opened diplomatic office in the Emirati capital of Abu Dhabi tied to the International Renewable Energy Agency. Senior Israeli officials have visited Abu Dubai.
Dhabi. Abu
Sorry,
Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi. Israeli athletes have participated in regional competitions in the UAE, and Israel has set to participate in Dubai's World Expo in 2020, which is now scheduled to open in October of 2021 due to the coronavirus pandemic. Significant momentum to the agreement began when Israel did not begin the process of annexing the West Bank territory on July 1st, as Netanyahu had indicated. The Emiratis reportedly took the opportunity to promise full normalization of relations if annex was taken off the table. This was the subtext to an op-ed that the Emirati ambassador to the United States published in Israel's largest daily newspaper, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, in June, sympathizing with the strong Israeli desire to widen the country's formal diplomatic relations with the Arab nations in the Persian Gulf and seizing upon the Emirati signaling. The Donald J. Trump administration oversaw a three-way diplomacy that resulted in the Abraham Accord. He's good at business deals. I don't know if you guys knew that about him. Whether it's golf courses or country clubs or high-rises or casinos or international diplomacy treaties, he's right up there. So it's just an amazing combination because I followed his career for years, from the 80s all the way forward, and it's just hysterical. I mean, I remember when he bought the Trump Tower, and that was such a huge deal in New York City. And then he
But it's really unusual that he is so pro-Israel. Like even George Bush, I didn't realize, like he just really didn't have much to do with Israel. So this is really outstanding that he is good friends with Israel.
Yeah.
The Bushes were very anti-Israel because of oil.
Because of who?
Oil.
Oil, they were very pro-Arab.
Texans, I guess. So, yeah.
Wow. I don't know. Well, the Clintons are even further behind that. So anyway, who would like to read this? I'll ask for a volunteer rather than picking on people.
I can read it.
Okay,
How might this affect Israeli-Palestinian relations and, more broadly, the region? Despite the apparent Israeli promise of halting annexation, the Palestinian leadership rejected the accord and recalled its ambassador from Abu Dhabi. From the perspective of the Palestinians and their supporters, the agreement reflects bad faith on the part of Israel, the UAE, and the United States, since the Israelis and Emiratis had been normalizing ties even before the Abraham Accord. This criticism is not unwarranted. Israel has demonstrated little interest in negotiations with the Palestinians, as it has tightened its grip on the West Bank and, along with Egypt, maintains a tight cordon around the Gaza Strip. The Trump administration has moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, ended or significantly curtailed aid to Palestinians, and produced a peace plan that Palestinians regard as grossly unfair to their national aspirations and rights. At the same time, leaders in Ramallah regard the ongoing normalization of ties between Israel and the UAE as an indication that Abu Dhabi has betrayed the Palestinian cause. For their part, the Emiratis do not want to subordinate their national interests to an ineffectual and corrupt Palestinian leadership. All of this suggests that, in the short run, any expectation of new negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority is misplaced.
So this is the optimum time. I mean, my whole lifetime, there's been nothing but absolute criticism by the Arab states against Israel for what happened with the Palestinians. The Six-Day War has ruled the day. I was born in '69, so it's been my whole lifetime. I've never seen this before. So this is totally new to me. The Arab states are like, oh, fuss and bother. We're tired of dealing with the Palestinian situation. Let's just make our own peace accord, because they can't get anywhere. Nobody can get anywhere. It's kind of like a lost cause. So this is sort of the last slide. This is the direct flight now from Tel Aviv to Dubai. Please fasten your safety belts. It'll be a short flight. They'll be able to go to Abu Dhabi and back and forth between the two countries. So this is our final slide for tonight, and then we'll pick up next week. Anybody would like to read this one? Roger looks like he's moving. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm moving. Yes,
You're still alive over there.
I just woke up and realized we were on a different slide.
Okay.
Hello.
Are any similar agreements in the works with other Arab states? Among countries in the Gulf, Bahrain is most likely to follow the UAE. King Ahmad has overseen normalization, including allowing Israeli officials to attend a regional security meeting in the country. Additionally, the Israeli foreign minister has met with his Bahraini counterpart and that official's predecessor. Oman is another possible candidate for normalization. Netanyahu met with the late Sultan Qaboos bin Said in Muscat in late 2018. However, Sultan Adiham bin Tariq, who came to power in January 2020, could act more cautiously regarding relations with Israel as he consolidates his power. Morocco and Sudan might also seek to establish diplomatic relations with Israel.
So,
Ryan can tell you what Dubai is like.
okay. Is he online?
Yes, he's back on.
Okay. Go ahead, Ryan.
Unmute yourself.
You have to
Hello.
hit the unmute button, Ryan. Are you there?
Perhaps not. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh.
So it's what I wanted you what I want to suggest tonight is that the UAE may be a domino effect because it's one of the richest countries in the Middle East. You're of course not going to see Syria or Lebanon or Iran make that list, or Turkey. Turkey wants the Dome of the Rocks to be his next mission to clear it off and make it an international city-state.
Oh, Ryan is there.
Okay.
Ryan's unmuted.
All right, Ryan, would you like to tell us about Dubai?
My mic is not working.
Is it working?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hi.
How are you?
Good.
It's good to have you.
Tell us about Dubai.
Well, Dubai, I haven't been there or nothing. My mom has.
Ah.
So
Did
I kind of don't know anything.
Did you fly over Dubai when you came from Sri Lanka?
No, we actually flew over Qatar.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
What can you
Sorry.
tell us what you saw in Qatar? Because that's like UAE. What did the land look like?
Sorry?
What did the land look like? Did you see deserts, or what did you see when you looked at the ground?
Well, it for once when like we were in the plane, I saw at the window, we were like seeing buildings on like land and water. So it was all surrounded with water.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, foreign correspondent Ryan Mashi. We appreciate it. It's nice to have boots on the ground in other countries to talk about these places. So we're going to be seeing hopefully next week, if my thing will go forward at all. The love of waxing cold next week. And we're going to also study a little bit about Obadiah and some of the other cases of the nations going up against Israel. So that's what we'll talk about next week. I know it's a real cheerful topic.
Can you explain for Ryan what you mean by it, just quickly, what love waxing cold means?
So the prophecy is that in the last days, the love of many is going to be waxing cold. This is it from Matthew 24. And that people will be multiplying their lawlessness and iniquity. And people think it's not happening, but it is. It's the compassion and empathy that people feel towards other people's situation is drying up. It's a well that everybody gets too tolerant and too tired of showing their affection and their resources with others, and it just dries up. Yes.
Tell him that waxing means growing.
Thank you.
So waxing means growing. So it means that people's hearts, instead of being hot towards their brothers and sisters and helping one another and loving one another, has grown cold and unempathetic and uncaring and unfeeling. And it's a danger that it's happening in our brotherhood, and it's very frightening during COVID because not a lot of people are returning and not a lot of people are staying in touch with each other anymore. It's sad. So.
I just want to make a comment about Qatar since Ryan just talked about that. Right now, they've been supporting the Palestinians, and so they give about $30 million to them. And they were thinking of stopping it, but the Palestinians were going to go and talk to them and say, no, we really want $40 million at least. So I don't know what's happening.
And who is this from?
This is Qatar.
Oh, Qatar. Okay. I thought it was
Really
like the Carter family, and I was like, what Carter family? There's lots of Carter families. Okay. Very interesting. So, very sorry to hear about June Dodal, and I'm sorry there was no ceremony and we can't go to the funeral, but I don't even have the Dodal's children's addresses, so if you all have them.
I'm going to get it for you. I just didn't
Okay.
have it when you wrote.
Okay, I'm just curious.
I just sent it to her house and said to the family of June Dodal.
Okay, all right, I'll do that. So I'm hoping to get in, this was the end of class 1 once we finish next week's, which has lasted all this time. Walter and Linda will be down at the Outer Banks next week, but they think they might tune in. Is anybody else not going to be in town that I should be aware of? Okay, I just wanted to know. Is there any other news that you guys have you want to share?
There's a hurricane.
I know, it's coming on Saturday.
Yes, Hurricane Laura.
Yeah, Jacob and I were out there painting the platform for the small shed and got that done tonight, so we didn't have to face the wind and rain on Saturday.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you all so much for your time for coming, and I'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Gesundheit.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye, Karen.
Bye. Take
Call
care.
us sometime.
Stay safe.
We will. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Oh, there's Walter.